welcome to Tech Notice. These two over here are the best representations of Windows and Mac world when it comes to small form factor computers. Mac Studio with M1 Ultra chip, and then this over here is an Intel NUC 12 Extreme or Dragon Canyon NUC. Both of them have their own benefits and drawbacks, different specs, different price tags. So if you're doing video editing, photo editing, 3D, rendering, something like that, which one is a better option for you? Or in fact, if you just want a cool small form factor computer, which one is better? Let's find out.
Motion Array is a fantastic tool for creators to make better videos and faster.
Motion Array has over 600,000
premium quality templates, presets, plugins, music and sound effects, stock video and photos. In a nutshell, it is a one-stop shop for all your video post-production needs. Configure the membership to suit your needs. Pay annually, monthly, cancel anytime you want, and enjoy your unlimited downloads. Not sure about Motion Array? Go try out the hundreds of free assets available on the website. Check out Motion Array in the video description below.
I just want to mention that I do have more dedicated and in-depth reviews of different things about the NUC and as well as the Mac Studio. So have a look at the Mac Studio playlist or the NUC 12 Extreme playlist and you'll find some more videos about them in there. I'm also going to leave the links for these two in the description below if you're interested in picking either of these up. So then let's compare the specs. The Mac over here has a 20-core CPU, whereas our PC has a 16-core CPU. The Mac has a 64-core GPU, and our PC is running an NVIDIA RTX 3070. We have 64 gigabytes of unified memory on the Mac, and on PC we have 64 gigabytes of RAM as well, running on CL20 and 3200 mega transfers a second. The Mac has 1 terabyte SSD, and we also have a 1 terabyte SSD, Gen 4 SSD on the PC as well. The Mac SSD is integrated to the chip and you can't upgrade that, whereas ours is just a 1 terabyte Gen 4 SN850 SSD. The Mac has Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5, whereas the PC has Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.2. In fact, this Wi-Fi and Bluetooth is very confusing for me for the Mac bit. Like, this system with that price point should have the latest Wi-Fi and Bluetooth standards built in, but no, we don't have that. Next, the price. This M1 Ultra Mac Studio costs $5,000 because this is the 64-core GPU version. Whereas this PC here, with everything built in, comes in roughly around $3,000. Well, exactly $3,100 in here. But if you're looking for deals and you can get less RAM or a little bit more budget RAM or something like that, you can get it even further down there. But roughly about $3,000 and $5,000. When we're looking at the design, we can see that there's two kind of separate designs here. One of them is very sleek, minimalistic, just clean design. That's what this Mac has over here. But there's no like configurations. It can't come in different colors. You can't change anything. This is what it looks like. That's it. Whereas this PC is a little bit of a different thing. There's some RGB on the bottom, as you can see, glowing. There's actually skull head in the front as well that can be illuminated, but I've turned it off because I don't like it that much. But general design is kind of like a Batmobile design, all black and then different shapes and things going around, a lot of events. A little bit of a different design. The RGB can be configured, by the way, on this as well. When you look at the design and noise, the Mac definitely has an edge over here. It's super silent. You can't really hear it, as quiet as you can get. This one over here does make a little bit of noise, but if you're familiar with PC parts and PC things, then in the PC world of things, it's very, very, very good. Very silent. Most of the time you don't hear it. When you start to hammer it a little bit, you hear it a little bit, but nothing to worry about here either. Looking at the ports of each of these, this Mac Studio features 6 Thunderbolt 4 ports, 2 USB Type-A ports in the back, which I believe are 5 gigabits in speed, 1 10 gigabit Ethernet port, which is an RJ45 connector, HDMI 2.0 mic, and audio jack, that's inputs and outputs. That's also high impedance audio jack, so you can use some of your studio headphones that require more power to kind of run them. And then we have an SD card slot in the front that is UHS 2 speeds. On the PC here, We have 6 USB Type-A ports that are 6 gigabits in speed in the back. We have 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports, one 10 gigabit Ethernet and one 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports, both of them RJ45 connectors, 3 HDMI ports and 2 display ports, one USB-C port in the front, 10 gigabits in speed, and another USB Type-A port in the front, that's 5 gigabits in speed, and also an SD card slot that's the same speed, UHS 2 speeds in the front. So when we're looking at just the ports on their own, I think I would have to give an edge to the PC, just because when you're on Mac, most likely you're gonna have to think about a dongle or some kind of an extra docking to get those Thunderbolt ports to do different things that you need, more USB ports or so on. Whereas the PC features kind of all of the ports straight away out of the box, and you don't need to worry about that, and still features 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports if you need to extend anything. So I think the edge here is for the PC. So let's start looking at the benchmarks then. First of all, we're going to look at the browsing benchmark, the Speedometer 2.0 on both of these devices. On the Mac side of things, we can see that I've done the test on Safari and we're hitting 291 and 294. That's absolutely amazing. This is with Safari. Chrome gets similar results, so if you want to use Chrome, you can do that on Mac Studio as well. Bear in mind, the actual speedometer max speed here goes to 140, so anything above that is super fast. This Mac NUC is 257 and 258, so still reasonably amount slower, but still super fast. Now what we're going to be doing next is doing a blended benchmark on both of these PCs to see the 3D rendering performance. So both of these systems, I'm going to press start now. Both of these are running. On the floor here, I'm actually recording both of these power draws, system power draw. We can see that the PC at the moment is pulling over 200 watts, whereas the Mac is pulling 76 watts. So pretty much 3 times less, and that is very good. In terms of power efficiency, that's much better. Now you can see that the NUC is pulling a bit less now, just because the Intel limited power draw, like 220 or 202 watts, is now pulled down to 65 watts. And now we're pulling maybe double the speed or something like that compared to the Mac Studio. In terms of the Mac Studio CPU performance per watt, for what we're seeing here, 73 watts pulled from the socket, there's nothing like that out there. Like in terms of performance per watt, this Mac Studio is the best in the world. You're not gonna get anything else that's as good per watt than this one. It doesn't make that big of a deal when we are using desktop PCs. Yes, power consumption less is okay, but at the same time, it's not that big of a deal. In laptops, it makes much more sense just because your actual power battery lifetime is directly affected with the power consumption, but on the PCs it doesn't really matter. In a year your maybe electricity bill difference is $10-20, something like that, when using them both, depending what you're using. Now look at that, the idle is about 8 watts on the Mac Studio. That's absolutely amazing. Now both of them have actually completed this, and I can see that the NUC on idle pulls more than 3 times what we have over here. It's more like almost 7 times as much power on idle. So the less you use it, the more efficient the Mac Studio here is. So looking at the benchmarks, the Mac did it in 195, 104 and 81 compared to the 127, 64 and 51. I have compared these benchmarks a lot before as well, and on the screen you can see the average of the CPU blended benchmarks, and the Mac Studio wins by a long shot here. Another thing I do want to do here again is to see how much the GPU pulls from the socket. So now both of the GPUs should be going. Let's have a look at the power consumption. Interesting, warming up on the Mac works much longer than on the PC. PC is already running full speed, and now Mac is catching up. The PC is pulling 270 watts, and Mac is pulling about 72 watts, something like that. So the PC is pulling much more power, but at the same time, we are getting a much better score as well. So we're pulling around 77 to 250 watts, like in comparison. So that's about 3.5 times as much power on the PC. But when we're looking at the scores, the scores difference is much different. In monster scene, the RTX 3070 is 200% better, 3 times as good as the Mac, and junk shop scene is 3.5 times as good as the Mac Studio, and the NUC is 3.2 times better in classroom scene than the Mac. So basically, when doing 3D rendering in Blender or something like that, then obviously the Mac Studio isn't the best option for you. Much better to go with a PC that has a dedicated NVIDIA graphics card that has this rendering power using the RT cores and CUDA cores and Tensor cores and all sorts of things. And as you can see in the power consumption as well, the PC is getting actually better GPU performance per watt, as you can see, compared to these Blender benchmarks. Moving on to Cinebench R23. The NUC is 15% better in the single core speeds, whereas multi-core speeds are about 30% slower on the NUC. In Geekbench 5, the NUC is about 4.1% slower in the single core scores, but about 43.4% slower on the multi-core scores. And you're thinking, whoa, that's a big difference there. Much bigger than Cinebench R23. And that's because this Geekbench benchmark doesn't actually count the threads, because our 8 performance cores have 2 threads per core. So we have 24 threads on this PC, whereas the Mac has actually just 20 cores. So there's actually a little bit more on there, but the performance difference in Geekbench 5 is that. When looking at the Geekbench 5 GPU comparison, then the Vulkan score, obviously we don't have that on the Mac, can't support that, but OpenCL, we can look at that score on the Mac. And that is 61% faster on the NUC, on the RTX 3070, and in CUDA or Metal scores, the CUDA is about 43.5% faster than the Metal score on the Mac Studio. So when it comes to GPU performance, the PC wins quite a bit over here. Let's have a look at some of the applications like Photoshop and so on. As you can see, the NUC is about 22% faster according to these benchmarks that I have run than the Mac Studio. And to be honest, the Mac Studio or the M1 Ultra isn't fully optimized for this benchmark, so I can't really give a win to the PC. In my experience, what I've done, like just, you know, checking around, they both feel the same in terms of like my Photoshop workflow, what I'm doing. Now, I'm not doing the most complicated things, but I can promise you, when you push both these systems in Photoshop, the Mac Studio is going to do a better job, especially when it comes to rendering and so on as well. And Adobe has updated the Photoshop, and more updates come out that are more and more utilized for the Mac Studio. So I do want to give a win to the Mac Studio in terms of the photo editing applications. But at the same time, this PC isn't far behind. If you're gonna get this, you're gonna have a great, super great time, and you're not gonna notice the difference. In Lightroom or Photoshop, if you're doing photo editing on these two, both of these systems are gonna run very, very fast. Now, video editing, and here we have a Premiere Pro. When looking at the scores, the overall score for the NUC is about 23% slower than the Mac Studio. But when looking at the standard overall score, it's only 15 or 14.4% slower. Interestingly, when you look at the standard live playback speed, then the NUC is actually better at about 6% better. Now that's interesting to me, just because the Mac has huge decoders and encoders inside there for the media engines, H.264, H.265, ProRes, and so on. So to see that this NUC with the Intel UHD 770 inside there with the standard overall score or live playback score is actually better on this, that just is absolutely amazing. To see that these media engines inside the CPU there in the iGPU are very, very good as well and perform equally good in Premiere Pro. Now, I do think that the Premiere Pro application isn't 100% optimized for the M1 Ultra, but still, these are the scores that we're getting at the moment. After Effects just updated itself as well, and we're getting much better scores now in After Effects than previously. Previously I was running maybe 700s or 800 scores, but now 1198, which is 19% faster than the NUC. Now you might be wondering, where's the Davinci Resolve and Final Cut, experience or benchmarks for the Mac Studio, because that's what you would be doing, and if you'd be getting Mac Studio and just put them head to head there and do the same export settings. I have seen a lot of them online, but I don't think they are so useful. Just when you see a benchmark of a different application being faster, that doesn't mean you're gonna change your whole workflow just to go to that different application. What you want to see is, okay, I'm using this application right now, and I want to know if I'm using a different tool for it, is it gonna go faster now? Because if you're a creative professional, you know that it's not so easy to change the application or just your workflow from Final Cut to Premiere Pro or Davinci Resolve and so on. But there are some people who are maybe used to having them all, but I do think if you're getting the Mac Studio, you're much better off using Final Cut, that's the most optimized, and then Davinci Resolve. They're both very, very well optimized for this, and you can see a lot of different benchmarks online. So if you're getting this for video editing and you don't have any previous kind of application package that you have to just kind of drag around and say, I'm using this, program, then using those will be cheaper and better on the Mac Studio. But at the same time, if you're using Premiere Pro, you're still gonna have a great time doing both. I just think that the exports on this NUC aren't as good as the Mac Studio. Now, I do think that the Mac Studio still has its weaknesses and it's not fully optimized for it, but there is a future for it. Hopefully the software guys will catch up and do this. But at the same time, video editing, is it good for both of them? They're absolutely good video editors, both of them absolutely amazing, especially when using mirrorless camera footage. Whatever edits you do, you're gonna have great time on both of them. I just want to say that if you're using Davinci Resolve and you're doing a lot of noise reduction, then the PC will be much better at doing that. M1 Ultra can't quite hack that noise reduction, whereas the RTX cards, NVIDIA cards, are much better at playing that back. But which one is better for video editing? The Mac is better. In V-Ray, the NUC is about 19% slower, and that's impressive for the M1 Ultra and Mac Studio because that application isn't optimized for the M1 either. So that's gonna go through Rosetta, but it's still gonna be better than the NUC. Now, another thing I wanna do is the SSD benchmarks, because Apple has made a big deal about their SSD speed. So I've done this on Windows PC over here already. As you can see, I've got these scores. So now let's go to the Mac and then let's do the same thing here. We've got this set. Let's press start and let's have a look. So when looking at the Mac disk speed test, we can see about 5,600 megabytes per second, 5,000, yeah, about the same, and then 5,200 read megabytes per second. So 5.7 here, 5.2, something like that. When looking at the PC with 5.2 and 5,000 megabytes per second. So about 500 megabytes slower on the write and about 150 megabytes per second on the read speed. So as you can see, the SSD benchmarks aren't so different from each other, and they both are kind of neck to neck each other. But if you're asking which SSD is faster, then we have to give the win to the Mac Studio. So just the conclusion in terms of the performance, the Mac is better at pretty much everything in terms of creative applications, apart from 3D rendering when it comes to GPU rendering. The CPU, like Blender render, for example, or V-Ray, is much better on the Mac, but when it comes to GPU accelerated things, it's much faster on the PC. And when you compare the CPU and GPU rendering, then the GPU rendering is much faster than CPU rendering. For example, in Blender, obviously when you render on GPU, it's much faster than rendering on the CPU. So if you're doing 3D work, probably the PC is a better option for you. But at the same time, photo and video editing, the Mac is a much better option for you. Now, said that, this PC is not far behind at all. It's tagging along there, and it is measurable about slower, about 20 to 30% sometimes slower, but in some of the applications it performs very, very well, like similar thing. Now, I would say that when you're working on your photos or sometimes video, depending on a codec. So when you get the PC, you're not actually gonna have bad performance. It's not bad at all. Just to like clarify this, it is actually still very, very good but just compared to these things, the Mac is slower. Another very important thing separating these two is the operating system, Mac OS and Windows 11. Now, there isn't really a big winner in this category, and this is really a big personal preference and what you've been grown up with and what you're more used to this. I have used both, and I'm using both of them daily, but I do want to mention that I'm using Windows more just because I find myself faster and I like Windows more. File systems, window snapping, scaling, I think works much better on Windows. But at the same time, I'm using Mac OS every day as well on my MacBook when preparing for these videos and so on. It's not bad, but I do think somehow for me, that's my personal preference. Call me biased, whatever. I think Windows has an edge over there. Let's talk about storage and upgrades. When you get this Mac Studio, you're gonna be stuck with whatever storage you chose for this system. Even though there is an upgrade slot or can have an upgrade slot, you can't really upgrade it. It's not upgradable. At the same time, this Intel NUC over here has 3 M.2 SSD storage slots in there, and they're all Gen 4 speeds. You can get all Gen 4 full fat speeds from there, which is absolutely amazing. Obviously, it supports SATA interface there as well, so SATA M.2 can go in there as well. If you look at the cost per terabyte, then on the Mac Studio you're going to be paying about $300 to $400 per terabyte, whereas on the PC side you're going to be paying about $120 to $170 per terabyte. So that is literally half the price, or even cheaper than half of the price. And at the same time, we're getting very, very similar speeds. Now, when you get these Windows SSDs on a deal as well, the difference is going to be even bigger. Then looking at the CPU, on Mac Studio, you can change that. In here, everything is configurable. You can actually take the whole compute unit off and later upgrade it in the future if Intel comes out with another, I don't know, 12900 NUC kind of compute unit, then you can just slot it in there because it's possible to, you know, just change that. You can change the graphics card, you can change the RAM, you can change the SSDs, everything is changeable. You can upgrade it. So in terms of the upgradability and future-proofness, I think the PC here has a win. The only upgrade path for the Mac over here is hoping for software optimizations for the M1 chip. Now we've got to look at the price. Now, I told you that this Mac Studio is $5,000 and this comes in at $3,000, but actually there's more to it than just that. When you are getting the Mac Studio, and this is what happened with me, if you're anything similar than me or doing any like kind of creative work, you're gonna need a few things for this Mac Studio to get started. And I'm not talking about keyboards and, you know, screens or mice or something like that. I'm talking about storage. I'm talking about different USB ports or docks and so on, because it's just not enough. To have 2 USB ports, it's not enough to plug everything in that you need. You're gonna have to extend that. You might need some more Ethernet ports. You might need some more USB-C ports. You might need some things, and that's what I found with the Mac Studio. Straight away, I needed some more things and needed some more accessories, where this NUC, it kind of provides everything and even gives you an option to, look, if you want to upgrade later, just pop another SSD in. It's super fast and super easy. Like, you just pull this side panel off, take this one screw off, pop it in, another screw back, pop the side panel back on, that's done. Whereas this is not an option on the Mac side. So the Mac is much more expensive than this one, about 40% more expensive. And if you remember the benchmarks, it wasn't very common to see this Mac being 40% better. But as you can see, this NUC 12 is a much better bang for buck value for your creative needs. And there's only like the very high-end creators who just want the best, and this is pretty much the best what you can get. And when they're getting that, they're gonna pay even more than what I paid for this, because you wanna upgrade the RAM and upgrade the storage and so on, get it straight away out of the factory. But then you're going to be starting to run this close to $8,000, which is just absolutely ridiculous. Now, I do want to mention another thing. It might be important to some people. Pages, Keynote, and Numbers are included with the Mac. So basically it's like Apple version of Microsoft Office, you know, PowerPoint, Excel, and Word, and so on. That's included with the Mac, if that is important to you. And you're never going to pay any license for that or any of that. Whereas on this Windows PC, you're going to have to buy that separately. And you might even have to buy for the Windows license, but that's very, very cheap. You don't have to worry about that. But Microsoft Office, you do have to pay for that extra. So price It is more expensive, it is better, but best bang for buck, definitely this PC. In conclusion, you might be wondering, why on earth do you even compare these two to each other? Because they're so different and so like, just different. If you're a creator, you're always on the kind of forkway of, shall I go Mac, shall I go PC, shall I go Mac, shall I go PC? In this video, I'm hoping to bring out these different sides, different benefits, different drawbacks, depending what you are doing, and helping you really to decide what's the best option for you. In terms of long-term investment, I do think this PC is a better option. It provides better value for your dollar. It gives you more upgradability options in the future, and it's more serviceable. This is not quite that. This becomes very, very expensive, but at the same time, there are people who just want the best. I wanted to plug it in and work, then this truly is that. So in the end of the day, you're gonna have to choose which one you want and which one works better for your workflow. I think both of them are very good options. Just depends how much cash you have and if you want to spend that. So let me know in the comment section below, which one would you choose? Mac Studio M1 Ultra or this NUC? Let me know in the comment section below. If you want to pick these up, I'm gonna leave the link in the description below. As always, thanks guys for watching. Likes if you enjoyed it, subs if you'd like to see more, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.